On December 7th, 2025, Line 6 Finch West opened as Toronto's first new rapid transit line in over 2 decades. If you live in Toronto, you probably know how that went.
47 minutes. A TTC bus passed not one, but two separate trains.
Yeah, it was bad. I visited the line on opening day as well, and my train took 52.5 minutes to traverse the 10.5 kilometer line. A couple weeks later, I outran the line on my first attempt, beating it by about 2 minutes. The most glaring issue with the line is of course the traffic signals, particularly when they let left-turning cars go through the intersection before any Line 6 vehicles. Let's take a look at those signals and see just how much of an impact they may be having on the line's speed. This video will focus on transit signal priority, which is a bit more complex than you might think. While those early yellow lights that the light rail vehicles get are an annoyance, they are out of the scope of this video. Transit signal priority, or TSP, is a broad category that includes any change to the traffic signals that benefits transit vehicles over cars. It even includes so-called passive TSP, which simply retimes the signals to be more aligned with the speeds of a bus or a streetcar. However, this kind of signaling is not really used in Toronto. You were probably thinking of active TSP, which can change the signal timings when a transit vehicle is detected. There are plenty of ways that a signal can do this, so let's look into them. The most common TSP implementation in Toronto is the extended green. When a bus or streetcar needs a little bit more time to get through an intersection, the light will let it do that and then turn red shortly after. There is a maximum amount of time that the green can be extended by, and when that time is exceeded, the light will turn red anyway. This is called failed priority, and it's most common when there's a stop on the near side. If a transit vehicle is approaching a red light, that red light can be shortened in what's called red truncation. However, red truncation is rather limited, as there's usually a minimum amount of time that the cross street needs to have its green for, especially if pedestrians are crossing. Many minor intersections in the city of Toronto already have quite short red times, so in most cases this won't actually save very much time. It would help much more at major intersections, though due to traffic considerations it may be faced with opposition at the city. After those two is phase insertion, where a specific transit-only phase is put into the signal cycle when a vehicle is detected. Phase insertion is often implemented in BRT and LRT systems running on the center of the street, typically before a left turn phase. One example of this is York Region's Viva BRT system, which at a few intersections lets buses go through before drivers can turn left. You could also rearrange signal phases or skip them entirely at an intersection. However, these are a bit more confusing to drivers, and I suspect because of that they're a bit less preferred here. Going a step further, you could implement adaptive TSP, which changes its behavior a bit depending on the conditions in the area. However, this relies on a bit newer technology than we have in the city, even on lines 5 and 6. Now, that's what you can do to change the signal phases to help transit, but it's not the only thing that you could customize when it comes to TSP. On the TTC standard bus and streetcar routes, the TSP is always unconditional, meaning that it will activate no matter what, even if that vehicle is early or about to bunch with the previous vehicle. Indeed, the experts I have spoken with and the literature I have read say that unconditional TSP does sometimes cause bunching or make it worse. Perhaps this is why most implementations of TSP these days are conditional. Conditional TSP is exactly what it sounds like. There is a condition to be met in order for TSP to be activated. Most conditional TSP implementations, including that on Viva, only activate if the bus is at least late or a certain number of minutes late. You could also, in theory, activate conditional TSP if the bus is less than a certain number of minutes early. However, on higher frequency lines such as Line 6, the regularity of the headway matters more than the schedule. As a result, you might want to implement a conditional TSP that looks into the number of minutes since the last vehicle has passed through the intersection. Adaptive TSP could make decisions about headway regularity even better. However, the technology on lines 5 and 6 would likely need a major upgrade in order for this to start. Of course, unconditional TSP systems are faster than conditional ones. As a result, the city will need to consider the advantages and the disadvantages of implementing unconditional and conditional systems to determine which one is best. Finally, another point of customization is how aggressive you want your TSP to be. An aggressive system is simply one that is willing to do more to help transit vehicles get through faster. It isn't actually a technical term in the literature, rather it's one used by advocates who want to improve TSP. A more aggressive system may have less stringent requirements to activate when it's conditional, or it may also be able to do more when it's activated, such as extending the green time for longer or implementing a phase in more parts of the signal cycle. TSP implementations do have a number of limitations to them. I'll cover a couple here. As mentioned before, failed priority is much more common when a stop is on the near side. This is because it's hard to predict exactly how long a vehicle will need to stop at a particular stop or station. Far side stops avoid this uncertainty and are thus generally preferred at intersections where TSP is implemented. Line 6 has a few stations that are not far side, so at those particular locations the TSP may be less reliable if implemented. Another issue is frequency. If lines are more frequent than around every 10 minutes, TSP's reliability starts to go down as it has to be activated almost every cycle. This is especially true when the signal will try to compensate for the lost green time that the cross street got after the TSP is activated. Thus, TSP is a flawed system. When the frequencies get a bit too high because the demand is too high, it may be better to implement an elevated line instead of one at grade. So, what does that mean for line 6? As of around 2 weeks after the line opened, trips are taking an average of 40 to 42 minutes from end to end, with some trips lasting as much as 48 minutes. Indeed, the trip that I did outrun was one of the 48-minute trips, and most trips I wouldn't have actually outrun. Clearly things have improved, but not to the level that we expected. I mean, Metrolinx was saying that it would take 33 minutes from end to end. A good TSP implementation would reduce the travel time by at least 3 or 4 minutes during the average trip. It will also make trips more reliable, as traffic signals are a major source of variance between trips. However, the signals are not the only thing that could be improved. Speeds on the line can also be a problem. At intersections, trains have to slow down to around 25 kilometers an hour, and there are a few other slow areas along the line. Some of these issues have been resolved since opening day, but there are still quite a few more to deal with now, particularly the intersections. So where does that leave line 6? It's certainly better than it was on opening day, but it still has a long way to go. Better transit signals will allow it to go faster and be more reliable. However, we need to consider the advantages and disadvantages of different TSP implementations in order to get the best one for our line. We must also not neglect other speed improvements we can give the line, particularly at intersections. Including these improvements will allow the line to actually reach the speeds that we want from it. I hope these improvements can occur soon, before any other light rail lines such as Line 5 Eglinton open in the coming months.